Welcome to Unapologetically Sensitive, where you can learn, relate, laugh, and maybe even live a bolder, brighter life. I'm your host, Patricia Young. This is a weekly podcast where we explore the strengths we have because of our sensitivity and some of the challenges it poses as well. The information in this podcast is not a substitute for help from a licensed mental health professional. Hey there. To the creatives, healers, sensitives, and deep thinkers, how the heck are you? I think you're really going to enjoy this episode with Emily today. She took the Online HSP course back in January of 2022, and she was able to articulate some things that I just have not been able to articulate about what it's like when you take the Online HSP course. But she says so many empowering things about how she really has embraced her traits and loves the ups and the downs. I don't know. I just think it's a great episode. Some of the things that she talks about is what her expectations were going into the course, what she thought she was going to get versus what she got. And she talks about being able to flip out of the mindset that there's something wrong with her. And she talks about really valuing experiencing life this day and reconnecting with her creative outlets, especially when it feels hard. She also talks about being in therapy and what the difference was between her therapist who introduced her to the trait of sensitivity. And initially she was kind of like, And then being in a group with other HSPs, what that was like. And we talk about why that was different for her. She also talks about how her insides and outsides didn't match. That may end up being the title of this episode. I haven't decided yet. But really learning about integrating that authenticity and that vulnerability and how that has really shifted how she shows up in the world and how she sees herself. And she also, one of the takeaways was she wasn't trusting her intuition. That's not something we address in the course, but I think that the nature of what happens in the course impacts people in different ways. And I had actually forgotten, but this group, I don't know, a couple weeks in, wanted to change the format of the group to a way that I had never run the course before. And I had forgotten it was a significant adjustment for me, but it really worked for the group. And I'm all about the group consensus. I'm all about doing what works for each group because every group is different. All the things that are going on in the world right now are different. And so adjusting to that is something that's really important. I don't know. I think you're really going to like it. Let me tell you a little bit about Emily. Emily is a researcher, educator, and highly sensitive introvert. She loves music, time in nature, and learning to be a better steward of her rich inner world. Emily lives with her highly sensitive rescue pup, Lyra, in the Santa Cruz Mountains of California. I think that's it. And now, on to the show. Hey, Emily, welcome. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks. How are you?
The good news is I'm not tired today. The bad news is I'm very irritable, but I'm setting all kinds of boundaries. But I'll do another recording about that. So we'll just set that aside. Thank you for asking.
Thank you for an honest answer.
I rock at that. You know, it was interesting that I reached out to you about coming on the podcast a couple months ago. And then I waited till the last minute and then sent an email and said, hey, are you free to come on the podcast? And your email was, I'll let you tell what the things are, but you said, I've got this and that and this going on. And so I thought, oh yeah, not a good time. And you're like, yeah, sure. I'd love to be on the podcast, which really surprised me because I thought that was your way of prefacing, like my life has too much going on right now and I just can't deal. So I'd love to just have you talk very briefly about, if you don't want to share the content of what's going on, but why you're able to be here, because I was really surprised.
Sure. Yeah, that was a funny email for me to write too. It was a new experience. Yeah, I mean, there's just been a lot going on in my life. Like I've had a lot of health stuff going on the past couple years, and yeah, recently moved out of my house because it's full of mold and had a family member in the hospital. So that was like a small slice of what's been going on. But I think, I don't know, despite everything being in chaos recently, I think I've been able to feel more like okay with the mess. I mean, life is always going to be throwing these unexpected curveballs. And I think I'm still kind of like putting my finger on exactly what it is that I'm able to handle it differently now. I think it's a lot of different things. But yeah, I don't know. I think right now it's like sometimes when things get so chaotic, it's like, you know what? Screw it. Like, why not? Like, there's never going to be a good time for so many things. So I thought it would
Sure.
be nice to reconnect with you and something kind of familiar
Oh,
amidst everything else going on.
oh, well, I'm glad you're here. Now, you took the HSP course in January of 2022 this year, and I think you ended about March, and we're recording this mid-July. So you've had a couple of months since the course ended. I'm curious to know what made you take the course? What drew you to it?
I think I came into the course looking for maybe tools or skills or something like that. I think that I'm someone who is really invested in understanding myself better. And my therapist had been bringing up sensitivity for probably a year or so before I tried to sign up for the course. And I kind of blew it off as like a bunch of hooey.
Mm-hmm.
And then, finally I started reading one of Elaine Aron's books. And I'm a researcher. So I was like reading all of this research and seeing myself in the research. My therapist was a wonderful support, but I also, being a researcher, was devouring like podcasts and everything and just thinking so much about, I don't know, like how it might be different to connect with a group in a
Mm-hmm.
coaching or a course scenario as a complement to everything else. Since I kind of felt like I had gotten what I was going to get out of therapy in sort of
Mm-hmm.
this arena, but it felt like there was still more out there. So
Okay.
I don't think I knew what that was, but I was excited to find out.
Yeah. Do you know what tools you were looking for? I know it's been a while, and if you don't remember, that's totally fine.
It's a good question. And it's kind of funny because I don't think the most valuable thing I ended up getting out of the course was tools. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
honestly not even sure that I knew what tools I was hoping to get. I think I just kind of came in from this mindset of some of my therapy experience has been about building a toolbox of
Mm-hmm.
ways to understand myself and sort of support myself. So, like, there must be some tools for this, you know?
Mm-hmm. It's really hard, I think, sometimes to put language to what it is that you were expecting, what it is that you got, that we change and we transform and we start to understand and integrate, and something just shifts. But I think it's often hard to quantify exactly what that is. So I just want to validate that if you're having a hard time coming up with words for it, I get it. And just because I asked doesn't necessarily mean that it's something you're able to answer.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it was almost kind of like a fantasy of, oh, there will be these tools and then this will all feel easier.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that was also for me kind of tethered to this mindset that I came in with about, oh, I need to do this course, or I want to do this course to like fix something in me that is irregular or defective or whatever. A lot of us have talked about this sort of experience.
Mm-hmm.
And I think one of the most beautiful things I got from the course was a complete flip of that mindset from, oh, I need to fix myself to, oh, my life is a garden and I need to plant things around me that will help me be the truest version of myself or, really comfortable in my own skin. So I think I also came into the course thinking, oh, I need to do this to change myself for the
Mm-hmm.
people in my life or my job or whatever. Which looking back, I'm glad it got me there, but that's a really bummer space to be operating from. So I'm really grateful that I found the course.
Yeah, thank you. I think that we see so many things of take this course and get rid of anxiety, cure your depression, that what we're provided by the media is this idea that having anxiety, having depression, being a deep thinker, being an overthinker, that those are wrong and bad things, and that most of what we see is how to fix it, get rid of it, eradicate it. How can we not internalize that and feel like there's something wrong with us? And you started out this interview beautifully by going, yeah, there's a lot going on and it's messy, and I'm just kind of in here being messy. And I can't tell you how many people come to me wanting to change, to not be so sensitive, to not, I mean, of course, we want to learn how to set boundaries and we don't want to get stuck in rumination. And there are tools that we can use, But so much of this work is about knowing that this is just how you're wired and it's okay. And is it working for you? And if it's causing you suffering, then what do you need to do to not suffer? But that suffering is often about, I don't want to be so sensitive and I don't want to get my feelings hurt and I don't want to have such a tender heart. And then, I don't know, I guess I want to say, if any of those resonate with you, have you made any shifts around any of those statements? So I don't put words in your mouth.
Yeah, I think that a big part of the course for me was being in a Zoom room with other people who related to all of these things and kind of like realizing how much I liked and valued all of these attributes in other people. And then it begs the question, wait, well then why don't I like have that perspective of myself? And what are all the positives of that for me as well that I'm seeing in these other people? So I think that was really interesting for me. And I think that I came in thinking, oh, like it would be great to build a stronger fortress or force field around myself to be less affected by everything around me. Maybe that was the tool that I thought, oh, Patricia's going to teach me how to throw up the force field. But I think instead I kind of realized, A, I don't really want the force field. I really value experiencing life this way. And B, that I don't know, it feels kind of like an energy source that can be harnessed for really great things. And I think that a concrete thing for me that has been, in a sense, a reframe is just reconnecting with a lot of creative outlets in my life and appreciating that that's something that I think I really need to create space for and hold space for, even when it feels hard, and especially when it feels hard. And kind of appreciating that I think that my sensitivity helps me to make art that is honest and vulnerable and that other people can connect with in that way. So
absolutely.
I feel like I had some of the pieces of that before this course, but I don't think I could have articulated it in that way before the course.
Well, and one of the things that I love that you said, and I'm curious to know, so you'd been working with your therapist. What was the difference of working with your therapist who's affirming your traits as an HSP and then being in a group of other people and seeing those traits exhibited? Because what happens is we often have people that don't appreciate our traits. So we hear you're too sensitive, you're too dramatic, you're too incensed, you worry too much, you think too much, you're too anxious, you're overthinking. So we think there's something wrong with us and there's something wrong with those traits. And what I heard you say is then when I was in a group of other people and saw those traits exhibited, I thought, I think I really like this. So it's a shift of being with your people as opposed to being told by people that are not your people that you need to change and be like other people.
Yeah.
So I wanted to reflect what I heard you say, but maybe this is redundant. What was different for you being in the group versus having your therapist try and affirm the traits? And if I've already answered your question, you can just say that.
No, I mean, I think you did definitely affirm that there's a real difference there. But I think something I would add to that I've thought about since the course is that I think there's like a really different dynamic. My therapist and I have a pretty casual relationship. She's awesome. I've known her now for a handful of years and she's supported me in multiple phases of my life. But I think there's like a very different dynamic when you are with a group of people that are all on more of a peer level and talking about these things. And I think that it, for me, dispelled so much of the self-judgment and shame around some of the topics that the course covers, like kind of people pleasing or perfectionism or things that in therapy might still feel like something that I need to fix about myself. Not that I was getting that from my therapist, but it feels really, really different to talk about it with other people and be able to like laugh about it and be curious about it. I think that now I'm able to take some of these things less seriously, kind of have like less ego involved and step back and just be like, oh, dang it. Like I'm doing that thing again. Okay, zoom out. What's going on here? Where is this coming from? The group helped me to really sit with the feelings instead of always jumping for the story or the explanation, which I learned that that's where I go when I have a lot of feelings.
I think we all do that. We feel uncomfortable. And instead of going, what am I feeling? Where am I feeling it? What's going on? We jump to a story in our head. So totally unrelated, but the story in my head, my husband's out of town. He normally does the dishes and runs the dishwasher. And I went to put soap in the dispenser, but you know how you flip it closed and that little latch latches and it wouldn't latch. And so I took the vinegar out and the toothbrush and I'm scrubbing and the dishwasher hasn't been working well. So the story that I made up in my head is, I bet he's not even closing that flap. And that's why our dishes have been so dirty. And like, why didn't he tell me? Like, I'm off on this whole thing. Doesn't he know that it has to open at the right time in the cycle? And this whole thing. And so I called him and said, hey, what do you do to keep it closed? He says, it's really hard. You just have to press hard. So story isn't true. I'm totally a blamer. I ran the dishwasher this morning. I got to check it and the thing is closed and it didn't open. But I think this is a minor story, but this is what we do. We feel uncomfortable. We have feelings. We can't figure something out. We make up a story in our head and usually it's not about us. Like my husband was the villain in this story because then I didn't have to feel bad about anything.
Yep.
So I think that's really very relevant. And I think that there's something that's so calming and normalizing when you hear other people go, oh my gosh, I do that too. Or somebody shares a story and you can relate. And then it's like, this isn't a deficiency. Other people experience this too. And then like you said, it happens. You go like, oh, there I am doing it again.
Yeah.
As opposed to often, I don't think this always happens with therapists, but this is why I do so much self-disclosure, because if you're talking with someone and they're either telling you how to fix it or change it, or somebody goes like, yeah, let me tell you about when I did that. And you go like, oh, okay.
Yep.
This is like, we all do this. Okay.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Yeah. I think I didn't realize until this course, how much energy I put into, I think it was for myself. I think it was trying to convince myself that I was together or knew what I was doing in life, which is, now to me kind of just ridiculous because I think we're all just figuring it out, as we go. And so it feels like this enormous weight lifted to just be like, well, here we are.
Yeah. What I'm hearing you say is this acceptance of this is how I am. This is how I'm wired. I show up messy. I show up imperfect, and I'm okay with that. And Jen and I have been talking a lot about coming from a place of rest, and that is coming from a place of rest as opposed to hustling to look like you've got your stuff together and that you've got it all handled and you know what you're doing. And most of us don't know what we're doing. We're just all trying to flail and figure it out.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that really resonates with me. I think that my 20s were very much about hustle and really trying to climb ladders for me in terms of career and school and everything else. And yeah, it feels really good and different to be in a place of what's actually serving me and what are the things that I want to be choosing instead of waiting for other things to find me in life.
Sure. Do you remember how nervous or excited you were before the first group, like what your fears were and then how it felt after the first group?
Yeah. I had tried to enroll in the course one cycle earlier. And I don't think I think it was under enrolled. So the course didn't run. And so it had fallen off my radar. I think I would have had maybe a lot more expectations if the course had run the first time, when I signed up for it. So in a way that was kind of liberating. By the time the course did happen, it felt like this sort of bonus thing that I was just along for the ride, see what happens. So I felt kind of relaxed and open-minded going into the first meeting. But to the second part of your question, the first meeting for me definitely was different than I expected, mostly because I remember I cried on our first call. And
I don't remember. I think I'm so used to people crying like, okay.
Yeah. And I think that I had not expected. I had expected the first call to just be kind of bookkeeping, meeting each other, everything else. And it was a great introduction to the course. So that was really kind of funny and surprising. And afterwards, I think did reveal to me that I did have an expectation, which is that I wouldn't cry until I knew people better. But I think it also just kind of created an opening for me to let go even more and be like, well, I'm not going to stop going. I'm going to see what this is about. And people know a little bit what I'm about now. So there's that.
Yeah. Do you recall how I responded or how the group responded around your crying. What I'm imagining is somebody going like, oh my God, what if that's me and I cry? And what is that going to be like? So I'm just curious if you remember how it felt being received in that vulnerable space.
Everybody was so kind to me. I think it was a funny moment in the sense that I don't think that we knew each other well enough that people like followed up with me in a way that I am so sure that if that happened now on a call with the same people, I would get like 3 texts and an email and like, a Marco Polo and a WhatsApp. But I think I almost felt a little bit like, well, maybe I got it out of the way. Maybe this is okay. But I remember, everybody was really kind. And I know that you, in that moment, I think also really just kind of created space for that to be like totally okay, totally normal, not a big deal. So it still felt a little weird to me, but it felt very different than if I had cried on a professional call for work or something like that, of course.
Well, and my guess is that other people felt a sense of relief and safety, that it's kind of like you went first. So it's like, okay, so this is what happens if somebody cries, because I want to hold it together. I don't want to cry. And they got through it and everybody else was supportive and Patricia seemed okay. And kind of like when you said, how am I? And I told you the truth. It's like, that can really be disarming when people are honest about what's going on. I'm having a gremlin that's going, stop talking about yourself. So I just want to name that gremlin. But I think that when we allow ourselves to be authentic and cry or vulnerable, it invites other people to meet us at that level and that depth, as opposed to I'm fine, you're fine, and it doesn't go anywhere. So my guess is it really set the tone for more openness in the group, because you did allow yourself to be vulnerable.
Yeah. And something I don't think I thought about until now is that I think it also created space for later support from people, in the sense that, what I cried about was I was really affected by things going on with the pandemic at that point. I'm immunocompromised, so my world has gotten really, really small and is still kind of pretty small at this point. And I was really struggling with that. And I think that even though it didn't become apparent necessarily like on that call, like the fact that I had voiced that and had been emotional about it and vulnerable about it created openings for people later to reach out who maybe also were relating to some of that feeling, but in like a more sort of one-on-one or smaller group conversation.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you have a sense of what was unexpected about the group?
There were a lot of things. I think I didn't expect to be able to relate so deeply to a group of people that is so diverse. I think that we represent multiple generations and experiences and political perspectives and like career sort of setups. Some of us have more in common than others, but I found us to be quite diverse in that way. And I think there's something really special about falling in love with humans who are so different than you, but because you are so the same in these other fundamental ways and how you're wired. And it's just been really cool to have conversations where we've been able to like show each other different perspectives. And some of us still meet regularly. And something that has come up is mother-daughter relationships. And it has been invaluable, so insightful to get to turn over these things that so many of us are navigating from different perspectives, from the daughter's perspective and the mother's perspective, and to see things really through all these different lenses.
Yeah. It always fascinates me that even though we're all HSPs, that we can show up so differently depending on our temperament and how we were raised and all of those things. So like you said, there can be a lot of variability, and your group did have a tremendous amount of diversity as far as age and socioeconomics and I think experience. Yeah. And I saw some of that, the intergenerational work that was happening within the group while we were meeting.
Yeah, I've really, really enjoyed that part of it. It's felt really precious to me to be able to like have that insight from people in my situation or on the flip of the situation that I feel like I'm walking through. So yeah, that's been really, really cool.
It is really nice when you have that. Yeah. And so your group is still meeting. Some of the people have chosen to still continue to meet.
Yeah, that's right. So we meet usually weekly now. And the majority of the people who did the course have been involved in that on like at least a rotating kind of basis. And I think it took us a minute to kind of find our groove, but now we usually have like a topic each week and doesn't require too much preparation, but it gives us a direction to talk around and explore something that maybe we wanted to revisit from the course or that we didn't get to in the course. And there's also just been a lot of sort of ongoing, like having a space for support of things that are going on in our lives from people who I think can offer this particular kind of highly attuned support for each of us.
Yeah. Yeah. I think especially during this time right now, having those connections is so important. I think just with the pandemic and the isolation and the political nonsense, and I'm not even going to name all the other stuff. I think that, I really am seeing that when we used to have villages, we really had that sense of community and how it just really eases the burden.
Yes, 100%. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Had you ever taken a course like this before?
I hadn't. I love learning. I've done a lot of school. I've taken courses on all kinds of things, but I've never done group therapy or group coaching or a course like this. No, so this was really new to me.
Yeah. You do have a PhD, so we know that you're a very learned scholar.
Yes, I just can't get enough of learning.
I get that. I think that's true for many HSPs. And not that you have to go to school to get a degree to get learning, but I think we all have our areas of special interest that we just love to dive into.
Yep, definitely.
Yeah. Did you feel seen and honored and heard in the group?
I did. Yeah. I think that maybe my crying on the first call was like a good test for that. I just threw myself right in there. But again, I think that speaking to the diversity of our group, I think there were moments where it could have gone differently in a different group of people because, sometimes something came up in the group that a couple of people had very contrasting experiences with or viewpoints on. And I think that you were able to help provide like a really safe space for that sort of thing to come up and to like be in it, not run from it or anything like that. And so I think for me, there were moments where like maybe something came up that felt a little bit bristly or tender for me. And even in those moments, I still felt everyone in the course was so considerate and really mindful of other people's reactions and emotions. So yeah, I did. I think both like in a group setting and then like it was really neat as we got to know each other better to see also in our group how much sort of side conversation follow-up there could be too. And that it wouldn't be unusual for someone to send a private message on Zoom if I seemed extra quiet that day, or to like follow up with the Marco Polo to check in or that kind of thing. So I think that really helped me to feel really seen and heard and all that.
Yeah. And I think your group would meet after we finished. We do our hour and 20 minutes. And then were you the one that hosted a group after that?
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah, we did. We had like an after party Zoom call where like sometimes we would jump over to another Zoom call and people might be like having their drink for their nightcap or their beer or a cup of tea. And yeah, that was kind of cool too, because it just created more space for people to like go more in depth or share more stories or offer more support. So that started maybe halfway through the course or something like that. But that did turn out to be a really nice space.
Yeah. And I just want to circle back that when you talked about if something happened and somebody bristled, that sometimes there were misunderstandings. Sometimes I would misread somebody and I would always ask for consent to, can we revisit that? And if people needed to get reality checks or feedback, they can be uncomfortable and difficult conversations. And we've got to learn how to have these conversations, because what happens is we don't, and then that stuff gets buried and we build up beliefs, or we have lenses that we see things through based on our wounding. Like my belief that like my husband just was not running the dishwasher correctly. I mean, that's my story. And had I not checked it out with him, who knows what would have happened from there. But with our experiences, we see things a certain way. And if we don't get a reality check and sometimes have uncomfortable, I mean, I'd like to believe that they were kind, they were respectful, they were with consent. I would ask for feedback, but sometimes people aren't accustomed to that. But I mean, how was that? I know you said it was uncomfortable, but what was it like seeing that modeling, and did it feel harsh or make you want to avoid it? Or yeah, what do you have to say about that?
Yeah, I don't feel like it felt harsh or anything like that. Yeah, I mean, sometimes I did want to avoid it, but I think that's more about me than like you or the course.
Most HSPs, it's most HSPs. Makes me feel uncomfortable. No, let's not do it.
Exactly. Just easier to not bother. But I do
Mhm.
think that something that I struggle with sometimes is just kind of taking a back seat to certain things in my life. And like, just, I think that, I mean, with my chronic illness has required so much flexibility from people around me that I think sometimes I'm like, oh, like, I want to be that for other people too. I want to be so flexible and accommodating. But I think that in reality, like, that is an area I struggle with, is just putting my needs last sometimes, and particularly like my
Mhm.
emotional needs, and really wanting to have like deep connections and to create those or find those if I'm not getting them. And I think that the course did help me to see that, and to, like you said, I think through seeing some of these things modeled, the discomfort helped me to appreciate that, I don't know, it's just worth it. Like, it's worth the discomfort. I think that I'm able to embody that more now in my life. Since the
Sure.
course, I've been able to like have and initiate even like conversations with people that I really care about, that I think I might have just kept on cruising before. But I think all those things have helped me to feel more myself too, because
Mhm.
if you're actually being honest with yourself and other people, that's really quite a liberating thing that will also bring you more of what
Well,
you need. So,
it takes the relationship to a deeper level where there's more authenticity and vulnerability and honesty. And I think underneath the fear of conflict and being uncomfortable, or fear of other people being uncomfortable, a lot of that is wounding. They're going to get mad at me. I'm going to get mad at them. I'm going to get frustrated. I can't manage my feelings. They can't manage my feelings. I mean, you alluded a little bit to that thing of most of us that have wounding don't like asking for help. We don't want to be the needy ones. We're the people that people come to. And it can be hard to be in that vulnerable position where people look at us as being strong and competent, but we need help and support, and knowing that we're supposed to ask for help and have needs. And, that whole thing of feeling like we're too much or wanting to hang back because we don't want to overwhelm people. I mean, that's all wounding stuff. And that's stuff that it's not directly in the curriculum for the course, but it sure seems like it comes out because those are common themes for so many of us because we've experienced that. I see you nodding your head. So what would you like to say?
yeah, just yes to all of that. I think that for each of us, it's different things that we bumped up against. I feel like some of the side conversations from the course were, in a sense, about us revisiting things that we thought we were done with. Or for me, at least,
Hmm.
I was definitely revisiting things that I thought I was done with. And I think for me, part of my history before this course and what led me to my last therapist was being in an abusive relationship. And I think that
Hmm.
that was like a really big thing that came up for me during the course that felt really hard. It felt like doing therapy on steroids at certain points in the course.
Hmm.
Not because we were talking about any of that stuff directly, but that the course really, I think, allowed me to see things in a different way. And then, but
Hmm.
also like that created an opportunity for me to heal some of those things. You were saying earlier, it's like if you don't see and confront these things, then you're not really dealing with them or integrating them into your life or having the relationships that you could be having. So that was actually, like, talk about unexpected things. That was very unexpected for me that came up, and that hearing other people share for them things as well about their own lives that unexpectedly resurfaced, and then how they
Hmm.
were able to see those differently too.
Yeah. And my guess is that you made the choice to do a deep dive on them because there's nothing in the course that is inherently confrontive or deep. I mean, we talk about boundaries and perfectionism and authenticity. So my guess is that you were right for this and you heard what you needed to hear. And then you took that and did a deep dive with it because that's where you were at in your process. And if somebody's not ready to do that work, there's nothing that's inherently confrontive or like we're going to uncover all of your deep, dark monsters in the course.
Yeah, I think that that's a good distinction to make for anyone listening to this for sure. Is that at no point was Patricia like, all right, everybody, demons out. Like, let's go. It's a brawl.
Let's go get the monsters.
Yeah, no, it wasn't like that at all. I think for me, I was sort of in a moment in my life that I had the capacity to engage in the course in a certain way that I wouldn't always. That was sort of timing luck.
Sure.
But yeah, if you want to go deep, this course can be the place for you. I think that for me, some of the things that supported that were being willing to try new things that were kind of uncomfortable, like Marco Polo was new and uncomfortable for me to connect with other people outside the course and have really intimate conversations. And I think also, I haven't journaled since I was a teenager, but I was like, let's try it. So I did. I started journaling during the course and every week would journal about the questions that you would send out. And I think that helped me to recognize a lot of these little hidden things that would come to the surface.
Yeah. Yeah. And talking about having to revisit old things, I was crying this morning because something that I've done so much work on, like I really thought this one was done. And it's up again. And I'm just like, oh. So frustrated.
It is so frustrating. Yes.
So frustrated. And it's there and time to do some work on it. I mean, if stuff comes up, that's what you got to do. Yay.
Yeah. Yay. I think something that was really special for me about the course was, I mean, I really don't think I got out of it what I thought I was going to get out of it. But I think what I got out of it was like so much more, but like less tangible. I told you I came in wanting skills or tools or the book that I should go read or the podcast I should listen to. And if you want those things, they're all there for you. I think those things, you offer a lot of that. But something I did come in wanting that I got that was less tangible was I remember writing in the sort of initial questionnaire form that you sent out that I felt like I had gotten to know myself better during the pandemic, which included sort of really feeling in my skin as an introvert and realizing I was a highly sensitive person, but that I felt like my insides and my outsides didn't match. My internal world felt really out of alignment with all of the sort of tangible pieces of my life. And I think that the course indirectly really did help me with that. Like, I think that's really boils down to authenticity is like at the core of that. But I think that through some of these other things that we've talked about already, those all kind of added up to support me in feeling really comfortable in my own skin and having like the confidence and language and validation and support to be like more myself. So if there's anybody else out there who is, I think, trying to figure that out, I do feel like this group of people in the course really helped me with that, sort of like syncing up my decisions and behavior with like how I feel inside. And then the one other thing that I think maybe I did want to get this, maybe I wrote this on the form too, was I also sensed that I wasn't trusting my intuition, but that it might be a good thing for me to do. I had some sort of vague sense of that coming into the course. And I think that now I see my intuition very much as an asset and something to be listened to. I think now I'm able to look at it like, oh, like my intuition the whole time has been this like wise old friend that I've just been talking over or kind of shushing into the background of my life. And the course, for I think many of these same reasons of being around other people and embracing this trait, I think the course really allowed me to lean into that more. So I think that I cannot state enough like how much that alone has changed my life. Just being like, oh, I can trust my gut and I should trust my gut. And this is coming from somewhere and it's a precious thing that I have this and not to be squandered. So,
yeah. I love the things that you articulate. And I was reflecting as you were talking because they're not things that I talk about when I try and, it's so hard to try and let people know what they're going to get from the course. And it's impossible to go in and not have expectations. It's impossible to not hear these interviews and want to have the same experience or the same transformation, or for somebody to have the same willingness to do a deep dive into their stuff. And so it's helpful and it's also problematic.
right.
And I haven't figured a way around that, but there's no curriculum where we talk about intuition. And there's really no curriculum where we talk about integrating your insides and your outsides, but we do talk about how we show up in the world for the other 80% and how we put that focus back on ourselves about what is it that you're wanting and thinking and feeling and needing. And you just did such a beautiful job articulating how that integration of what was going on the inside and the outside, it wasn't coherent. And so now it's more congruent. But that was what your process was. And somebody else coming into the group could have a totally different experience. And it's quite the conundrum. I just have to trust that it lands where it lands. And I want people to know that there's great stuff, but then I also don't want people to come expecting to get something specific. But I think that came in wanting one thing and you left with something else, but that was equally or more valuable than what you thought you wanted. But how can you even know?
Yeah, totally. Yeah. It's so funny you mentioned this because my therapist has another client who I think might take your course because I had clearly had all these really positive things that came from it. And so that information was passed along. And I like said all these really great things about it to my therapist. And then when she said that the other client was going to do it, I said, oh, just so you know, like, yeah, I'm sure that it's super different for everybody. And like, I hope that I hope they don't expect to have like exactly the experience I had, because I had listened myself to, some of these interviews that you've done with people.
Sure.
And admittedly, like that did shape, I think, like the early meetings that we had.
Sure.
Especially hearing people talk about like maybe the connection that they had with other participants in the course and being nervous. Oh, like, are we going to have that? I want that. But you were very clear and reassuring to us throughout that we would get things that we needed out of the course. But in a sense, I do think it's a little bit of an exercise in surrender, which for me is not easy. So
I think for most of us, it's not, and it's hard to not have expectations. But I think if you come into it knowing that you will focus on you and your process, if that's what you're committed to, the rest will come. And I don't know what the outcome is going to be, but if you come in committed to getting what you need, I think the rest can unfold, and it's easier said than done. But yeah. We need to wrap up, but I wanted to ask you, if someone's thinking about the course, and these are the things that go on for me when I think like, am I going to fit in? Am I really going to learn anything? Is it any good? What if I don't click? What if it's boring? Think about all those ways that I typically do not feel part of groups. Like I think for most HSPs, you go groups and people want to pull their hair out. So if somebody's having some of those fears or concerns, is there anything that you would be able to tell them that may help? Yeah.
I think that in a sense, it's about, you said it so beautifully earlier, like finding your people and like trusting that like that is the foundation for whatever you might get out of the course, and trusting that that's going to be different for everybody. Because I think for me, it's like if you want to meet people who play board games, you might go to like a board game meetup. I think like in a sense, this course can be that structure, that sort of like gathering point for people who are interested in knowing this part of themselves better. So I think trusting that a little bit and like putting some stock in that, because I was really pleasantly surprised when the course got going, how many of us were listening to similar or complementary podcasts or swapping book recommendations, or like, oh, like my therapist and I just did this really cool exercise I want to share. And so certainly not that you have to come in with any of those experiences in place at all to, I want to be clear about that. But yeah, I think there's really, you can't put a price on like being in a room of people who are committed to the same kind of work that you are interested in doing. So
yeah, I think often we share stuff in groups and people just look at us and then we feel like, oop, should I have said
yeah,
that? And to be in a group where people go like, oh yeah, well, this was my experience. When we're with people that are wired like us, not exactly the same, but wired, that sense of belonging. And it's what we should have gotten in our families. This sense of course you feel this way. Of course that goes on. That then we know that it's not us. And then we make that internal adjustment instead of feeling like we're too whatever. I mean, those things still come up. Even today, I was using Marco Polo with someone, and I feel like the background music should be like wah 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 wah, because I've been really irritable about stuff, and I gave somebody a trigger warning, like I'm just really, I sent a picture of my monster face. So those wounds still stay with me, and if I'm communicating with someone that's having an off day and maybe they don't have the capacity, I want to give them that, but it also doesn't prevent me from being authentic and struggling in the moment and sharing. And I think that's part of the beauty of all of this. That when we find our people, we don't have to pretend like things are okay, and we can be really authentic and say like, do you have this space? I'm giving you a trigger warning. Here's my monster face. And it's been really nice. Like I've just felt so, I had a good cry today, and I've been feeling so supported in being in this messy, irritable, crabby place. And I don't have to be alone in it. That is a gift.
Yes.
That is a gift.
Yes. I so agree with that.
Yeah.
I think that I think you modeled that so nicely for us in the group, and that it's so refreshing. It has been so refreshing to me since the course ended to stay in touch with folks and have people just feel comfortable also like taking up that space when they're feeling off, and just sending a text or a Marco Polo or jumping on a call and saying like, oh, I'm feeling really grouchy today or whatever. So I think, yeah. And to be comfortable with it. I think I've always enjoyed having feelings about everything, good, bad, even though it's hard. But I think now I'm able to like really reframe that for myself and like, oh, this is such a privilege to get to experience life in like high definition. Everything just vivid in all of these beautiful ways, even like the really sucky parts. And to, like you said, just be way more honest about that with people. And then that brings closeness. So
that's such an empowering statement, that it's such a blessing to experience life in high definition, to really be present for the things that are really satisfying and fulfilling and the things that are more sucky. Like it doesn't get much better than that, as opposed to fighting, why do I have to be so sensitive? Why do these terrible things happen? It's just such an empowered statement. You've made a couple statements like that I've written down that are just so, it's okay to just show up and be who I am. I love that.
Yeah.
Yay.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I mean, I think the course was, such an empowering experience. But like, it's like the gift that keeps on giving afterwards. If you have a brain that's like always working in the background, which mine is.
Most of us do. It's like having tabs open on the computer, always filtering.
Exactly. I think like, it's like one of those things that the course has planted so many seeds that have continued to sort of bust through and grow into little, little things since then.
It's so nice to hear. We need to wrap up. Is there anything else that I haven't asked you that you want to share before we end?
I don't think so.
Oh, well, thanks so much for being here today. This has really been a fun conversation. I love hearing other people's perspectives, because I feel like I say the same things over and over. So it's really nice to hear. Yeah, I just love hearing your experience. So thank you for being here today, Emily.
No, thank you for inviting me. It was really nice to be able to have this conversation.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to keeping in touch and hearing how your life continues to grow and change.
Sounds great.
All right, bye.
Thanks.
Hey again. I'm curious to know what you thought. I loved her insights. She's so articulate. Anyways, if you are interested in taking the next Online HSP course, it's scheduled to begin Monday, September 12th, 2022, and go through October 14th, 2022. There's a chance we're going to need to extend it an extra couple weeks. I'm planning on going on a paddling trip to Baja around that time, and I'm going to be gone, I think, for 2 weeks. So those dates may need to change. I'm recording this early in July, and by the time you hear this, hopefully I'll have some dates a little bit clearer and it'll be on the website. Registration will begin August 17th and go through August 31st. For the first week, 8/17 to 8/23, there'll be early bird registration. And from 8/24 to 8/31, the price is going to go up a little bit. I know things are tight right now. I'm not trying to convince you to do anything. If you think about the cost of a therapy session with one therapist, if you break this down, take the course cost, divide it by 10, it's pretty affordable. I know people are struggling, so I'm not trying to convince you. I'm just trying to contextualize the price. Anyways, if you want information, you can go to unapologeticallysensitive.com. You can go to the HSP groups page, and there's information about registration, and you can register if you're interested. I think that's all I have. I feel like I should be saying more, but this is all I have. Remember, sensitivity is nothing to apologize for. It's our superpower. Have a blessed day.